got here. So just a few months before, they're with Daniel, and he says, hey, I don't think we should eat this food in Daniel chapter 1. And so they follow Daniel's lead. Okay, that works out. Okay, Daniel chapter 3. Daniel says, hey, we need to pray about this because we're all going to die. Because the king said we've got to be able to tell the dream and interpret it. Okay, we'll follow Daniel's lead. It works out. Now all of a sudden, there's no Daniel. This is an opportunity. It's an opportunity to see what God's going to do. And the test is coming. So even though Daniel's not there, though, God had something to say through Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. You see, for some of us, if we walk in circles, if we are moving in communities that have people of faith in them, right, we draw strength and courage from them. But occasionally what will happen is that we will get removed for a brief moment of time from that community, and it's terrifying. And that moment, when we're unsure of ourselves, we can look back and we can see what God has done in our life. And almost like God has been teaching us how to ride a bike, He's been showing us how to ride with training wheels. And then finally we get into an opportunity where He takes those training wheels off and He says, okay, now it's time. This is exactly where they are. They've seen Daniel be faithful. They followed his lead. And so now here they are. They're waiting to see what God is going to do. See, the old wise men may not have been able to get rid of Daniel, but they could take out his friends. This is an opportunity. So Nebuchadnezzar responds here in verses 13 through 15. And notice how the words that he uses in verse 15. Because he says, at the end of verse 15, he says, but if you don't worship it, you will immediately be thrown into a furnace of blazing fire. And who is the God who can rescue you from my power? The king offers a test to allow them to redeem themselves, but notice that his challenge is not actually about the worship. His challenge actually shows his heart for a minute. One of the things that we do often is we read this story about Nebuchadnezzar, the one about the statue that's made of the different materials. But the first 4 chapters of Daniel are actually God presenting himself to Nebuchadnezzar over a series of time. And every time Nebuchadnezzar refuses to see God. He acknowledges God with his lips. But God is trying to make a point. Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, the people of Israel, God is using them to get to a person. And that person is Nebuchadnezzar. So right here we see something in his heart. We see that he believes that he actually is the God. And Romans 1 tells us that the ultimate betrayal against God is when a person believes that they are in a position to judge God, and they are the God themselves. So Nebuchadnezzar says, who's going to save you from this power? What he doesn't know is that his lack of relationship actually is the thing that's driving his fear. Have you ever met somebody who has a hair trigger, and they will snap at a second's notice? You know where that comes from? It comes from fear. A heart that is not at rest is a heart that's at war. A fearful heart is what drives emotional outbursts. But notice how they respond here in verses 16 through 18. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they replied to the king, Nebuchadnezzar, we don't need to give you an answer to this question. If the God we serve exists, then he can rescue us from the furnace of blazing fire. And he can rescue us from the power of you, the king. But even if he doesn't rescue us, we want you as king to know that we will not serve your gods, nor worship the golden statue you set up. The famous phrase is even if God doesn't save us. But before we even get there, I want you to look at verse 16 and how they respond. They say, Nebuchadnezzar, we don't need to give you an answer to this question. They don't have to give an answer because a human being is not equal to God. One of the things you've got to realize about your life is that no human being has the power to change your life. No one does. No one has the authority to take away from you what God has given to you. This echoes what Jesus said in Matthew chapter 10. Listen to this. Therefore, do not be afraid of them, since there is nothing covered that won't be uncovered, and nothing hidden that won't be made known. What I tell you in the dark, speak in the light. What you hear in a whisper, proclaim on the housetops. Don't fear those who kill the body, but are not able to kill the soul. Rather, fear him who is able to destroy both soul and body in hell. Aren't 2 sparrows sold for a penny, and yet not one of them falls to the ground without your Father's consent? But even the hairs of your head have all been counted. So don't be afraid, therefore. You are worth more than many sparrows. Jesus' point is this, is that when we walk with a proper understanding of faith and who God is, when we walk into these moments where there are challenges to our faith, when there are challenges to who we are, our purpose, our identity as believers in Christ, nothing will shake us because we have settled the issue before we showed up to the challenge. What's happening here is that they understand that God is the ultimate authority. See, a person of faith, a person with the gift of faith, they understand that there is no situation that they're going to be in to where they are outside of God's authority and His control. Now, this doesn't mean that we just say, okay, well, if it's God's will that my life crashes and burns, then it's God's will. That's not how this works. The truth is that God is going to put us in tense situations, and He's going to allow us to put the gospel on display because we have learned to trust and have faith. That's what's happening with these men right here. See, look at verse 7. They start pushing back. Not only are they not afraid, they push back on him. Verse 17. If the God we serve exists, now honestly, they know Nebuchadnezzar understands that their God has the power to deliver them because of what just happened, just previously. So they're like, we don't have to tell you the answer to this. If the God we serve exists, then He can rescue us from the furnace of blazing fire, and He can rescue us from the power of you, the king. They directly go back to him specifically. This is not just a statement of fact when they say, if our God we serve, if He exists. It's a direct answer to his statement that I'm God. These guys aren't just saying, okay, well, if you got to throw us in there, then okay, sure, why not? They're saying, look, you know exactly what's going to happen here. They give him a direct challenge. You have seen what our God can do, and you want to go ahead and fight this battle? Awesome. Sure, let's go ahead. Game on, let's go. They aren't being timid about this thing. They know that God has the power to save them, but the faithful live by absolutes. One of the primary things that our world is trying to do is trying to convince us that there is no absolute truth. There is not anything rock solid that you can build your life on, but that's not true. Everyone has their truth in our culture. Everything is up to personal interpretation. But the faithful are ones that live by absolute truth. Look at verse 18. But even if He does not rescue us, we want you as king to know. Notice they're addressing him directly. You, the king, Nebuchadnezzar, to know that we will not serve your gods or worship the gold statue you set up. Notice they're not talking about the culture. They're not talking about Babylon. They're not talking about all the other people. They're making a direct statement directly to the guy in power. And they know that he can take their life. The even if implies that they had their mind made up before the situation presented itself. Do you remember what happened in Daniel chapter 1? Use your sanctified imagination and think about this. You have 4 teenagers. Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They are in chains, walking from Jerusalem towards Babylon in a long line of other slaves. These are relatively wealthy children from wealthy families. These are well-educated people. I think something happened on the road from Jerusalem to Babylon. I think that a decision was made. Because when they show up in Babylon in Daniel chapter 1, when they're presented with the food that's going to defile them against the law of God, they've already made their decision. When they're presented with an opportunity to interpret a dream, they've already made their decision. Now they're in this situation. They've already made their decision. See, the thing about people of faith is that one of the defining attributes about them is the resolve to make a decision and not move from it. It's also one of the most infuriating things about people of faith. We have a long heritage of people who have made a conscious decision to follow Christ and to do it no matter what the cost. So the question to you tonight is, have you made up your mind? Or is this something casual that you do? Do you just go to church because there's nice people or because there's occasionally free food? Do you hang out with other young adults because, they're kind of fun? They get fun activities? Do you go to church because the music is nice and you enjoy the beat? Or have you made a decision today or before today that no matter what happens in your life, that you will be a certain person, you will be faithful no matter what comes? If you don't make that decision before the time comes, when the time comes, you will fold and you will fail. The thing about a faithful person is they decide who they want to be right now and they live by it and they don't change. See, their message was not just a general statement, but directed specifically at the problem, which was Nebuchadnezzar. He didn't know the one true God. And they knew that. See, those who have been given the gift of faith are people who make decisions before challenges come because they've settled who God is. Nebuchadnezzar says, I'm God, I'm more powerful than God, I have full authority over you, I'm going to end your life right now. Well, to the person who's already resolved, well, you're not God, and I really don't care what you do to my body, I'm going to get a new one anyway, so it doesn't really matter what you do. To that person, there's nothing that can be done to them. See, these are the people who have the resolve within themselves that they're not responsible for the outcome of their decisions because they've accepted that God is the ultimate authority. See, one of the primary ways that God uses the gift of faith is to provide his people with individuals who will make up their mind before the challenge in order to supply others with the courage to stand up for the truth. Think about this. The decision that you make today to totally abandon everything that you own and everything that you are to follow Jesus Christ, one day in the future, God will use to change someone's life. There is a long heritage of people who gave up control. And then later on down their life, an opportunity presents itself, and God puts that decision on display. Resolve who you are, because the challenge is coming, whether you like it or not. See, the thing about these challenges, though, is that to the person who's unfaithful, they're fearful. So I want you to see here that faith also comes with a defiance of fear. It doesn't touch us. Look at verse 19. It says, Then Nebuchadnezzar was filled with rage, and the expression on his face changed toward Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. I think he was kind of casual about this conversation. I think he thought they would fold. He gave orders to heat the furnace 7 times more than was customary. And he commanded some of his best soldiers in his army to tie up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and throw them into the furnace of blazing fire. So these men in their trousers, robes, head coverings, and other clothes were tied up and thrown into the furnace of blazing fire. Since the king's command was so urgent and the furnace extremely hot, the raging flames killed those men who carried Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego up. And these 3 men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, fell bound into the furnace of blazing fire. Let me pause right there for a second. So once we've resolved who is actually the Lord, there is no fear. It's amazing to me, in the few occasions that I've been able to experience this in my life, that when I'm in a dangerous situation or I'm in a situation where I could suffer, but I know I'm there in righteousness, that there is not fear. Because the fruit of the Spirit, of these gifts, love, joy, and peace. God doesn't just give us these gifts and then hope things work out for us and let us suffer or white knuckle it all the way. It comes with an understanding that he is in control. So Nebuchadnezzar, he flies into this rage, right? He commands the furnace to be heated 7 times harder than usual. That's just a Hebrew idiom for it's like it just hotter than hot, as hot as it can go, right? He's not saying, okay, right, it's at 100 degrees, I want it to be 700 degrees. That's not what he's saying. It's a metaphor. He's like, crank it up, as high it'll go, right? And so the environment is so tense that the only people that are going to obey him are the ones that are his loyalist guards. Everybody else is terrified. This dude's losing his mind, right? He's about to start killing people left and right. You're dead, you're dead, you're dead, you're dead, you're dead. So his most courageous, most loyal guys, they just like grab him. And it says right here in verse 20 that he commanded some of his best soldiers in his army to tie Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, put them in the fire. So these men, in their trousers, robes, head coverings, and other clothes, were tied up and thrown into the furnace. Since the king's command was so urgent, that word there, urgent, actually means was so, this is actually a combination of several words. Basically, it means that he was losing his mind so much, so quickly, that they didn't have time to think. They just grabbed them and took them towards the furnace. So he throws them in, and they're killed in the process. Notice that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego didn't have time to think about what they'd done. It was like, I don't care what it is. I am so furious you're going to die right now. We went from, I have the power over you, to an 11, like that. What happens when a person of faith is in a tense situation? We go from, let's just kind of dip our toe and see how rebellious you want to be against God's authority, to open defiance and total vitriol towards God's people. There's no halfway. As soon as the world knows that you're going to be obedient, it will not stop. It will not stop. It wants to grind you into the ground. I have received some pretty strong comments and messages lately on social media because of some things that I've posted, that I've shared. And turns out all it takes is one little thing to make people who said they were my friend, who loved my open attitude and my genuine love for people, and thought that I was great and that I was accepting of everyone, for me to take one biblical stand, all of a sudden I am transphobic, homophobic, I hate people, I want to kill baby puppies, and I just hate the world. I'm the worst person in the world. See, the thing that I think that we don't understand fully is because we're so comfortable that we think that we can just kind of glide and that the world's not going to notice that we exist. That's not how this works. The truth is provocative because the truth brings conviction. The truth makes people feel bad. You know, I would love to get up here and tell you all the nice and fun, fuzzy things about how God loves you and everything is great, and that is all true. But if I never tell you that you need to be made right with God because you're a rebellious, broken person, I have not done my job. Not because I'm a pastor, but because I'm a follower of Christ. I have to tell you these things because to not do so is to know that you got a cancer diagnosis and never tell you to go see a doctor. This is what it means to be a person of faith, that we are going to be fought and we are going to be attacked and we're going to be ground into the ground. But notice as these guys, these big, strong, warrior men, courageous men, grab these Jewish teenagers, they are so nervous about the king that they drag them to the furnace to their own peril. See, one of the things about the world is that the world is defined by fear. If the last, 12 months has taught us anything about fear, it's that fear is the most effective thing to change people's lives. Right? Oh, don't touch that door handle. Don't touch it. You have a 96% chance that you're going to be just fine, but don't touch that door handle. Don't talk to your grandma. Don't go outside your house. If you're going to go outside your house, hold your breath. The world, since it's separated from everything that's true, has only one state, and that is fear. So these guys are so overwhelmed by fear. Nebuchadnezzar is so overwhelmed by fear that everybody loses their mind and they fall into a panic. The original language that describes all this emotion is a little bit more descriptive. It's a combination of several Aramaic words, which means to crash, to be amazed, to be stunned, and to be put into ruins. So they throw these guys in the furnace, and what happens? Nebuchadnezzar, I can see him, the guards are taking them to the furnace, they throw them in, he's like, okay, good. He sits down on his throne in verse 24. Then King Nebuchadnezzar jumped up in alarm. And he said to his advisors, "Wait, didn't we throw 3 men bound into the fire?" "Yes, of course, your majesty," they replied to the king. Remember, everybody's freaking out, right? And he exclaimed, "Look, I see 4 men, not tied, walking around in the fire unharmed. The 4th looks like the son of the gods." What's that about? While everybody else is falling into a panic, Nebuchadnezzar looks inside and he can't believe what he sees, and so he's got to double check himself. So he asks his advisors, "Do you guys see what I'm seeing? I thought we put 3 guys in there." And they're not writhing around in pain. They're not screaming. They're hanging out. They're just hanging out in the middle of a fiery furnace that's heated 70 times. It's a lot. It's hot. What's amazing about this, we focus so much on Nebuchadnezzar's point of view, but think about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They've already resolved, I'm going to die. At this point, this is the 3rd time in their life that they are going to be put to death. So it's like, okay, cool, well, awesome. Just another Tuesday. Yep. But they find themselves resolved going into the furnace. And just think about that. Think about being in that place. Seeing the flames. You see your buddy. His ropes are gone. He's not tied up anymore because the ropes have burned up. But there's another person there. A 4th person. That strangely is described in the same way that Jesus is described in Revelation. I wonder what conversation happened in the furnace. I wonder if they heard words. I wonder if they said, "Whoa." And if that 4th person said, "You're doing good. What do you expect? Here we are." You see, the same God who Nebuchadnezzar called out in verse 15, he now sees behind a window in a furnace. And he doesn't know what to do with himself. See, we've got to always remember that faith comes with an audience. When God gives his children boldness and puts them in situations to use it, he will almost always provide an audience in order to teach others that he is the source of power and all authority in the universe. Some of you may be in a furnace right now. You may be in a situation where you feel like you are totally out of control and you feel like you're this close. But the reality is that God is faithful even when we are not faithful. And if you are walking through these seasons of your life, you need to understand that he is not ignorant of the things that you're going through. He knows exactly where you are. But he is doing these things because he has curated an audience for you to see how you handle these situations. He's going to put that decision that you made all those years ago, all those months ago, all those days ago to the test. Because he wants other people to see the courage of your decision. This is the reality of living in faith. That God uses the gift of authority to speak his own authority into the lives of other people. So if we have courage, if we're not fearful, then what's the point of all of this? Well, it ends with faith inspiring the weak to be faithful. Look at how this ends. In verse 26, he continues, and Nebuchadnezzar, he approaches the door. I can just imagine him, like he's super freaked out right now. He was like the man in charge, and now he doesn't know what to do. Nebuchadnezzar then approached the door of the furnace of blazing fire and called, "Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, you servants of the Most High God, come out." So Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came out of the fire. When the satraps, prefects, governors, and the king's advisors gathered around, they saw that the fire had no effect on the bodies of these men. Not a hair on their heads was singed, their robes were unaffected, and there was no smell of fire on them. Think about this. Okay, think about this setting. He literally has every powerful person in the kingdom at this place. The entire nation of Babylon is watching God speak truth directly to Nebuchadnezzar. And God chose Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego to be those people. That, yeah, there's no reason to be afraid. Man, what an audience. See, as he approaches very anxiously, he calls out to these Hebrews and he says, hey guys, come out. And he realizes that he was wrong, that these men aren't just teenagers. These are holy men. These are people who are children of God. How many of you, when people see you struggle, when they see you walk through the challenges that you're facing, do they acknowledge you're a child of God? The most powerful testimony of all of our ancestors has been that in the middle of persecution, when they were castigated and they were made fun of and they were dragged before judges and tribunals, that their community looked at them and they said, wait a second, all the things that they're saying about them, that's not consistent with who I know that person to be. Who are you when people are watching? It's interesting that there's no evidence of fire. All these people come around them and they're like, wait a second, you don't even smell like smoke. You know, those who have the gift of faith can sometimes seem unaffected by the challenges that they're going through. I saw a quote today that said, you know, just because someone carries something well doesn't mean that their load's not heavy. You know, I want to encourage you, if you have the gift of faith and you are carrying something heavy, that God sees you. He does. And the reason why he's given you that load is because he wants you to share the gospel with the world. So that when you get those questions, they say, hey, how are you doing? And you have the temptation from the enemy to say, I'm fine. I'm good. It's all good. I'm great. That's an invitation. I learned this last year when my brother died. That if people ask me, how are you doing? And I said, I'm good. I'm fine. You know, God's good. Lord gives, Lord takes away. If I dismiss those opportunities to share the gospel, I miss it. I miss it. The whole point is to share the gospel. The whole point of the furnace was to speak to Nebuchadnezzar's life. The whole point of the statue dream was to speak to Nebuchadnezzar. In Daniel chapter 4, we see God speak directly to Nebuchadnezzar and it changes his life. And he makes a profession that he is the one true God and he converts to faith. This is a supernatural reality about those who have faith, is that God's going to give you a load and he's going to expect you to speak the gospel when people ask you about it. The other thing is that they're a source of strength for those who are watching. Look at how this ends. So Nebuchadnezzar, verse 28, Nebuchadnezzar exclaimed, praise the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. He sent his angel and rescued his servants who trusted in him. They violated the king's command and risked their lives rather than serve or worship any god except their God. Therefore, I issue a decree that anyone of any people, nation, or tongue who says anything offensive against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego will be torn limb from limb and his household made a garbage dump. Wow, okay, cool. For there is no other God who is able to deliver like this. Then the king rewarded Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the province of Babylon. You know, Nebuchadnezzar goes from this uptight dude trying to get his people to do what he wants them to do for national pride. And he ends up being humbled in front of the entire nation because 3 men stepped up in obedience and in faith. The emperor of the most powerful empire at the time is brought to his knees in front of everybody that he's supposed to be smarter than. And God uses that as an opportunity to elevate the one true God and the truth. He goes on, he protects the people of Israel, part of this decree. You know, and it's easy to think that that's the takeaway. But it's not. That's significant. It's significant that the people of Israel got protection because of this. That definitely is true. But what's even more significant is that God spoke directly to Nebuchadnezzar in this moment. And look at how he responds in the last part of chapter 4, or the first part of chapter 4. This is his decree that he sends out to the people. King Nebuchadnezzar, to those of every people, nation, language who live on the whole earth, may your prosperity increase. I am pleased to tell you about the miracle and wonders the Most High God has done for me. How great are his miracles and how mighty his wonders. His kingdom is an eternal kingdom, and his dominion is from generation to generation. These are the last words that Nebuchadnezzar says before God grabs a hold of his heart. You know, the thing about the gift of faith is that it's a gift of a testimony. You know, it's one of the most significant tools that God uses outside of his word to change the lives of people. If you have the gift of faith, I want you to understand that it doesn't just come with the package. It's something that's significant. It's something that has a kingdom purpose. Because other people are going to draw strength from you, that's true. The world's going to hear the gospel from you, that's true. But the reality is that God has chosen you to be unique in the body of his people, because he has invited you and given you a supernatural gift to walk closely with him, to walk with resolve and to walk in confidence. That comes with peace. So that when other people are running around like a crazy person, not knowing what to do, you're able to be steady. That God has done that on purpose for you. Why? Because he chose you to serve that role in his body. He gave others the gift of wisdom. He gave others the gift of prophecy. He gave others the gift of giving, the gift of service. But to you, he's given you an incredible gift. This isn't just standard. This doesn't just come with the package. This is something that he has done on purpose because he is going to give you an audience. But I will give you a challenge, though, for those who have the gift of faith. It can be very tempting to coast and to think that you have things figured out and to think that, oh, well, you know, me and God were good. And to take that confidence and let that turn into pride. And to think that you're good. You don't need to do anything else. You've done your time. You've done your thing. And you start out good. And you start out well. And you begin to compromise who you are. And you begin to compromise your walk with Christ. And you begin to take for granted the audience that he's given you. Do not do that. Because just like he elevates leaders to influence people, he raises up people of faith to inspire others. Just like bad leadership can ruin lives, bad faith can ruin lives too. Every gift comes with responsibility. And that's the responsibility to be with him, abiding in him. To know that it's done and it's worked well. Because people are watching. I don't say that because I want you to be like super uptight and insecure in who you are. But I say that because God has given you an incredible gift. The gift to be able to speak truth and to walk with resolve, and also to look behind you, and one day you will see people following. Because there are a lot of leaders who don't have faith. Don't be afraid when the time comes. If you haven't made a decision about who you want to be and who you are as a person, I want to invite you to do that. It starts with a relationship with Jesus. You may have been in church your whole life, but you have never actually made the decision, you know what, I am not going to do my own thing anymore. I'm so tired of doing my own thing. And I want to just, I don't care what it takes. I want to go full force towards Jesus. I don't care what it is. I want to chase him. If you haven't made that decision, I want to invite you to come talk to me. I know that I'm kind of weird, but I would love to talk to you about that. I know that Krista would too. I know there are many people in this room that would love to talk to you about that. Don't think for 1 second that you are good with God if you just have a casual relationship with Jesus. Because that's not how this works. You either are in or you are out. And if you haven't spent any time in a furnace, chances are you're not on the in. Let me pray for you and then we'll go. Lord Jesus, I thank you for today and I thank you for your word. I pray, Father, that you would just watch over us. I pray, Father, for those who have the gift of faith in our group, that you would give us boldness. I pray that you would just put put a burr in our mind about making that decision about whether or not we actually are in. Father, I pray that as we move forward and as we grow and as we seek you and pursue you, that you would give us an iron resolve. Lord, give us the confidence to make a decision and to stick with it, to not be double-minded, but to be people who are resolved to the truth. Father, I thank you again for Reach and what you have done in my life through this, and I pray, Lord, that you would protect our community from the enemy. It's in Jesus' name that I pray. Amen.
Hey guys, Pastor Philip Jackson with Reach Tulsa. I am so glad that you chose to join us here tonight on our live stream. I want to encourage you guys to be a part of our community. You can learn more about Reach by going to our church's website, evergreenbc.org/reach. You can also find us on social media by looking for reach.tulsa. We're on Instagram, on all the other major platforms. You can get connected there to know what's going on here at Reach Tulsa. I want to encourage you, you are not alone. You have a place, and you belong here. I'll see you soon.